Those words changed everything. I stood frozen in the kitchen of Lumiere, Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant, while Marcus gripped my shoulders like I was about to vanish into thin air. His face was ghost white, and I could see actual fear in his eyes, something I'd never seen in 3 years of working for him. "Sophia, listen to me very carefully," he said, his voice trembling. "Mrs. Eleanor Castellano just asked the host who you were. She used your full name, Sophia Martinez." "How the hell does she know your name?" I didn't have an answer. My mouth went dry, and suddenly the expensive kitchen around me felt like it was closing in. I was invisible. That was my entire job. Keep your head down, refill glasses before they're empty, smile politely but not too warmly, and never, ever make eye contact with guests who could buy and sell you 1,000 times over. I'd perfected the art of disappearing in plain sight, serving billionaires who discussed their stock portfolios and third homes in Aspen while I existed as nothing more than a shadow with a wine bottle. "I don't know," I whispered, my hands starting to shake. "I've never even spoken to her." "Well, she wants to speak to you now." Marcus released my shoulders and ran his hand through his thinning hair. "She specifically requested that you serve their table tonight. Not just serve, she wants you assigned to them for the entire evening." The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. I'd served the Castellano family dozens of times over the past 3 years. Richard Castellano, the tech billionaire who'd made his fortune in artificial intelligence before he turned 30, was a regular. He came in every few weeks with various combinations of family members, business associates, or dates who all looked like they'd stepped off a runway. I knew his order by heart. He always started with the oysters, always drank an obscenely expensive Burgundy, and never once looked at me like I was human. None of them ever had. That was the unspoken rule at Lumiere. The servers were expensive furniture. We existed to make their experience seamless, perfect, invisible. The moment you became visible, the moment they actually saw you as a person, something had gone wrong. "Marcus, I swear I didn't do anything," I said, hearing the desperation in my own voice. "I've never stepped out of line with them. I've never—" "I know," he cut me off, but his expression said he wasn't entirely sure. "Just be careful tonight. The Castellanos aren't just wealthy, Sophia. They're connected. If his mother has taken an interest in you for some reason." He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. "If you're wondering how this night could possibly get worse, trust me. Stick around and hit that subscribe button, because what happened next is something I still can't fully believe." I smoothed down my black uniform, checked my reflection in the steel refrigerator door, and walked back out into the dining room. My heart was hammering so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. The main dining room of Lumiere was all dark wood and soft lighting, designed to make rich people feel like they were in an exclusive club, which I suppose they were. The Castellano table was in the corner, the best table in the house, naturally. Richard sat at the head with his usual confident posture, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my car. Next to him was his wife, Lauren, blonde and polished like a perfectly cut diamond. Across from them sat his younger brother, David, scrolling through his phone with the bored expression of someone who'd rather be anywhere else. And at the end of the table, in the seat that commanded a view of the entire restaurant, sat Eleanor Castellano. She was 80 years old but looked 60, with silver hair pulled back in an elegant twist and the kind of bone structure that suggested she'd been stunning her entire life. She wore a simple navy dress with pearls, real ones obviously, and she was looking right at me as I approached. Not through me, at me. "Good evening," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "My name is Sophia, and I'll be taking care of you tonight." "Sophia Martinez," Eleanor said. Not a question, a statement. Richard looked up from his menu, confused. "Mother, do you know the waitress?" "I know everyone worth knowing," Eleanor replied, still staring at me with those sharp blue eyes. "Don't I, Sophia? This is the moment I should tell you the truth. 3 months earlier, I'd served Eleanor Castellano at a private luncheon. Just her, alone, which was unusual. She'd been reading a book, an actual physical book, not a tablet, and when I'd refilled her water glass, I'd glanced at the title. It was in Spanish. Cien años de soledad. One of my favorites. I'd said without thinking. The words had just slipped out. She'd looked up at me then, really looked at me, and smiled. "You've read Garcia Marquez?" I should have apologized and walked away. Instead, I'd nodded. My grandmother used to read it to me. Well, parts of it. Some sections weren't exactly appropriate for a 10-year-old. Eleanor had laughed, actually laughed, and for 5 minutes, we'd talked about magical realism and Latin American literature while I stood there holding a water pitcher, completely violating every rule of invisible service. When I'd finally excused myself, terrified that Marcus had seen, Eleanor had caught my name from my tag. I'd thought nothing of it. She was just a bored old woman making conversation with the help. Rich people did that sometimes when they were alone. Treated you like a person for a moment before going back to their real lives. I'd been so wrong. We met briefly, I said carefully, aware that everyone at the table was now looking at me. You were reading Garcia Marquez. And you told me your grandmother read it to you in the original Spanish, Eleanor continued. You also mentioned you were studying literature at Hunter College. Night classes, working your way through. How is that going? Richard's expression shifted from confusion to something else. Suspicion, maybe. Mother, why do you know so much about the waitress? Because I pay attention, Eleanor said calmly. And because Sophia here is far too intelligent to be invisible. The way she said that last word, invisible, made me realize she knew exactly what Marcus had told me in the kitchen. She'd planned this whole thing. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my notepad. Can I start you with some drinks? Actually, Eleanor said, setting down her menu, I'd like Sophia to join us for dinner. The entire table went silent. Lauren's perfectly glossed mouth fell open. David looked up from his phone for the first time. And Richard's face went from surprise to angry in about 2 seconds. That's completely inappropriate, he said sharply. Mother, this is a business dinner. We're discussing the foundation. The foundation that I started with my late husband's money, Eleanor interrupted. The foundation that I still chair. And if I want to invite someone to join us, I will. Have you ever watched a rich family implode in real time? Drop a comment below if you've ever been caught in the middle of something that was way above your pay grade, because I was about to get a masterclass in billionaire family drama. Mrs. Castellano, I appreciate the offer, but I'm working, I said quickly, trying to defuse whatever bomb was about to go off. I can't. You're working 2 jobs to pay for college while supporting your mother who's going through cancer treatment, Eleanor said, and my blood turned to ice. You haven't missed a single shift in 3 years, and you send half your paycheck home to Queens every month. You're 27 years old and you're exhausted, so please, sit down. How did she know all of that? How could she possibly know about my mother? What the hell is going on? Richard demanded. Mother, have you been investigating the staff? I've been paying attention to someone who actually works for what she has, Eleanor replied, her voice cutting. Something my children seem to have forgotten how to do. And there it was. I wasn't the point of this dinner at all. I was the weapon. Eleanor Castellano had chosen me, invisible, struggling, working-class me, to make a point to her billion-dollar family. And I was standing in the middle of their battlefield wearing a server's uniform and wondering how badly this was going to destroy my life. I need to check on my other tables, I managed to say, backing away. Sit down, Sophia, Eleanor said, her voice gentle but firm. Please, what I have to say involves you. Every instinct I had screamed at me to run. Go to the kitchen, tell Marcus I was sick, and get as far away from this family as possible. But something in Eleanor's expression stopped me. It wasn't cruelty or manipulation. It was something else. It was respect. No one had looked at me with that kind of respect in years. So I pulled out the chair and sat down at a table where the flowers cost more than my weekly paycheck. And I waited for my world to either end or change completely. Richard was on his feet. This is insane. I'm calling Douglas. Your lawyer? Eleanor smiled. Go ahead. Call him. While you're at it, ask him about the provision in my will that states the foundation's entire endowment, $2 billion, goes to the person who best embodies the values your father and I founded it on. The table went dead silent. For years, I've watched you children fight over money you didn't earn. Make decisions that benefit yourselves instead of the communities we're supposed to serve, and treat people like Sophia as if they're invisible. Eleanor folded her hands on the table. So, I've made a decision. I couldn't breathe. I literally couldn't breathe. I'm establishing a new scholarship program, Eleanor continued. Full ride, all expenses, for workers like Sophia who are trying to build better lives. And Sophia is going to help me run it. You can't be serious, Lauren gasped. I'm completely serious. Eleanor turned to me. I've spent 3 months having you investigated, Sophia. I know everything about you. Your grades, nearly perfect despite your schedule. Your volunteer work at the community center. The way you send money home even when it means you're eating ramen for dinner. You're exactly what this foundation should be supporting. Richard sat back down heavily. You're giving foundation money to a waitress. I'm giving foundation resources to someone who's actually earned them, Eleanor corrected. And I'm offering Sophia a position as a program director once she finishes her degree. Salary, benefits, and a seat at the table where decisions are made. The room was spinning. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like me. Why? I whispered. Why me? Eleanor smiled, and for the first time, I saw real warmth in those blue eyes. Because 3 months ago, you talked to me about Gabriel Garcia Marquez like I was a person, not a checkbook. You've been invisible to my family your entire time here, but I saw you. And I'm tired of being surrounded by people who only see dollar signs. If you're still watching this, share it with someone who needs to hear that being seen, really seen, can change everything. And subscribe, because the aftermath of this dinner is a whole other story. Richard stood up again, threw his napkin on the table, and walked out. Lauren followed, shooting me a look that could have melted steel. David just sat there, looking between his grandmother and me like he was watching a movie. That went well, Eleanor said dryly. Sophia, I understand this is overwhelming. You don't have to decide tonight, but I want you to know the offer is real, and it's not going away. My eyes were stinging with tears I couldn't let fall. Not here. Not now. Mrs. Castellano, I don't understand. I'm nobody. You're somebody who works 3 times as hard as my children ever have, she interrupted. You're somebody who takes care of her family and still finds time to volunteer. You're somebody who reads Garcia Marquez and talks about magical realism while holding a water pitcher. She leaned forward. You're exactly the kind of person who deserves a chance, so I'm giving you one. Marcus appeared at my elbow, looking like he was about to have a heart attack. Sophia, is everything all right? Everything is perfect, Eleanor said before I could respond. Sophia and I were just discussing her future. She'll be taking the rest of the night off. I'll settle her section's bills and add a generous tip for the inconvenience. Mrs. Castellano, I can't just leave. Yes, you can. She pulled out a business card and pressed it into my hand. My personal number. Call me tomorrow and we'll discuss the details. Take the night. Process this. But know that I'm serious, and this opportunity is real. I looked down at the card in my shaking hands. Eleanor Castellano, Chairman, Castellano Foundation, a phone number with a Manhattan area code. Thank you, I managed to say. I don't. Thank you. Thank yourself, Eleanor replied. You did the work. I'm just finally paying attention to the right people. I walked back to the kitchen in a daze, still clutching that business card. Marcus started to say something, but I couldn't hear him over the roaring in my ears. I changed out of my uniform, grabbed my bag, and walked out into the Manhattan night. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Eleanor. In case you were wondering if tonight was real, it was. Call me tomorrow. And Sophia? Stop being invisible. The world needs to see you. I sat down on the curb outside Lumiere, a 27-year-old waitress holding a business card that might change my entire life, and I finally let myself cry. 3 months later, I finished my degree. 6 months after that, I started my position as program director of the Castellano Foundation Opportunity Initiative. We've awarded 17 full scholarships so far to people who, like me, were working themselves to death trying to build better lives. People who'd been invisible. Richard and Lauren barely speak to Eleanor now. David actually applied to work at the foundation. Turns out he was just as tired of being seen as nothing but a trust fund. Eleanor and I have lunch every Tuesday, and we still talk about books. My mother's treatment is covered by my new health insurance. I have an apartment in Brooklyn that doesn't have cockroaches, and when I walk into restaurants now, I make eye contact with every single server and I tip like someone who remembers what invisible feels like. Would you have taken the chance if you'd been in my position? Let me know in the comments. I love hearing your stories. And if this touched you, subscribe because I'm just getting started sharing what it's like to go from invisible to impossible to ignore. Stay invisible, my boss whispered that night. But Eleanor Castellano saw me anyway. And sometimes, being seen by the right person at the right time is all it takes to change everything. The world told me to stay small, stay quiet, stay invisible. I'm done with that. And if you are too, I hope this story reminds you that you deserve to be seen exactly as you are. Hardworking, brilliant, and absolutely worth noticing. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you what happened in the days after that dinner, because that's when things got really complicated. The next morning, I stared at Eleanor's business card for 2 hours before I finally called. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone 3 times. When she answered on the second ring, her voice was warm and clear, like we were old friends catching up. "Sophia, I was hoping you'd call early. That tells me you're serious." "Mrs. Castellano, I need to understand something," I said, my voice barely steady. "Why did you really do this? And please, tell me the truth." There was a long pause. Then Eleanor sighed, and I heard something in that sound. Something tired and sad and real. "My husband built our fortune from nothing," she said quietly. "He was the son of immigrants, worked 3 jobs to put himself through college. When he made his first million, he cried because he could finally send money home to his mother." Another pause. "Then he made his first billion, and everything changed. Our children grew up with everything handed to them. They forgot where we came from. They forgot what work actually means. So I'm a lesson for your kids?" "No." Her voice turned sharp. "You're a reminder for me. 3 months ago, I sat in that restaurant alone, and you spoke to me about Garcia Marquez like I mattered. Not my money, not my name. Me. Do you know how rare that is in my world?" I did know. I'd seen how people acted around the wealthy at Lumiere. The fake laughs, the excessive flattery, the way everyone became a mirror reflecting back whatever the rich person wanted to see. "When you walked away that day," Eleanor continued, "I realized I'd spent 20 years building a foundation that was supposed to help people like you, but it was being run by people who'd never struggled a day in their lives. People who approved safe, comfortable grants to organizations that looked good on paper but didn't actually change anything. So you investigated me. I hired a private investigator, yes. I'm not proud of invading your privacy, but I needed to be sure you were real, that your struggle was real, that your character was real." She paused. "Everything checked out. Better than checked out. Sophia, you're exactly what this foundation needs. What I need." My eyes were burning. "I don't know if I can do this. I'm just a waitress with a literature degree. You're a woman who raised herself up with 0 help while taking care of her sick mother," Eleanor interrupted. "You're someone who understands what it means to be invisible because society decided you weren't worth seeing. That's not just anything. That's everything." We met for coffee that afternoon at a small cafe in Brooklyn, my neighborhood, not hers. Eleanor showed up in jeans and a simple sweater, and for 3 hours, we planned what would become the Opportunity Initiative. We talked about scholarship criteria, about finding people who were working themselves to death in jobs that society dismissed, about giving second chances to people who'd never had a first chance. "I want you to start immediately," Eleanor said, sliding a folder across the table. "I've already drawn up the employment contract. Read it carefully, have a lawyer look at it if you want. But Sophia, I need you to know, this isn't charity. This is a job, and I expect you to work harder than you've ever worked in your life." I opened the folder and nearly choked on my coffee. The salary was more than I'd made in 3 years at Lumiere. The benefits included health insurance that would cover my mother's treatment completely. There was a signing bonus that would wipe out my student loans. "This is too much," I whispered. It's exactly right, Eleanor corrected. This is what your work is worth, what you've always been worth. That's when I broke down completely. Right there in that Brooklyn cafe, I put my head in my hands and sobbed. For every double shift I'd worked while falling asleep in class, for every time I'd skipped meals to send money home, for every moment I'd felt invisible and worthless and stuck. Eleanor reached across the table and held my hand, and she didn't say anything. She just let me cry. I'll do it, I finally said, wiping my eyes. I'll do it, and I'll make you proud. Make yourself proud, Eleanor said. That's all I ask. The first month was brutal. Richard tried to have me fired 3 times, claiming I wasn't qualified. Lauren started rumors that I was manipulating his mother. The foundation's board, all wealthy donors who liked having their names on buildings, revolted when they heard a former waitress would be making decisions about their money. Eleanor shut them all down with a single board meeting. This foundation will operate according to my late husband's vision, or it won't operate at all, she announced. Sophia stays. Anyone who has a problem with that can resign immediately, and I'll happily accept. No one resigned. They needed the prestige and tax breaks too much. But they made my life hell in subtle ways. Excluding me from meetings, talking over me when I did speak, dismissing my ideas as naive or unrealistic. I came home crying more nights than I care to admit. Then I awarded my first scholarship. Her name was Maria, a 34-year-old housekeeper with 3 kids who was taking online classes to become a nurse. She worked 60 hours a week cleaning houses, studied at midnight after her children were asleep, and was about to drop out because she couldn't afford the tuition anymore. When I called to tell her she'd received a full scholarship, she screamed so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. Then she cried. Then she asked if this was a scam, because things like this didn't happen to people like her. They do now, I told her. And Maria, you're going to finish that nursing degree, and you're going to help people. And one day when someone tells you they're struggling, you're going to remember this moment, and you're going to help them too. That's when I understood what Eleanor had given me. Not just a job or money or opportunity. She'd given me the power to make other people visible. We've awarded scholarships to 17 people now. A single father working as a janitor who's studying computer science. A former foster kid who's going to law school to fight for children's rights. A grandmother who immigrated at 50 and is learning English while training to be a teacher. Every single one of them was invisible before we saw them. Richard eventually came around, actually. He showed up at my office 6 months in, looking uncomfortable. My mother was right about you, he said stiffly. I've been watching the program and it's good work. Important work. Thank you, I said carefully. I was raised to think success meant accumulating wealth, he continued. That's what everyone around me valued. But watching you with these scholarship recipients, seeing how you actually change lives, he trailed off. I forgot that money is supposed to be a tool, not a trophy. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was something. Last Tuesday, Eleanor and I had our usual lunch. She's 81 now, moving a little slower, but still sharp as ever. I have a confession, she said over her salmon. That day you mentioned Garcia Marquez. I wasn't reading that book by accident. I set down my fork. What do you mean? I'd been watching you for weeks before that, Eleanor admitted. The way you worked, the way you treated everyone with kindness even when you were exhausted. So I brought my favorite book in Spanish, hoping you might notice, hoping you might say something. You set a trap? I created an opportunity, she corrected with a smile. And you took it. You could have stayed invisible, Sophia. You could have said nothing that day. But you didn't. You saw someone reading a book you loved, and you couldn't help but be yourself for just one moment. That's what changed everything? One moment? One moment of authenticity in a world of people performing, Eleanor said. Yes, that changed everything. I think about that a lot now. How one conversation, one moment of being seen and being real, created this entire new life. How staying invisible would have been safer, easier, but would have cost me everything I have now. My mother's cancer is in remission. She came to visit last month and cried when she saw my office, with my name on the door and my degrees framed on the wall. Mija, she whispered, touching the nameplate. Sophia Martinez, Program Director. Your grandmother would be so proud. I think about my grandmother reading me Garcia Marquez, teaching me that magic exists in the everyday, in the moments when impossible things become real. This whole experience feels like magical realism. The billionaire who saw the invisible waitress, the scholarship program that changes lives, the woman who went from serving tables to sitting at them. But it's not magic. It's what happens when someone with power decides to actually look at the people society has trained them not to see. Stay invisible, Marcus had whispered that night. And for 3 years, I had. I'd perfected the art of disappearing, of being background noise in other people's stories. Then Eleanor Castellano asked for me by name, and everything changed. Not because she rescued me. I want to be clear about that. I was already saving myself, one night class and one paycheck at a time. But she gave me something I didn't even know I was missing. She gave me visibility. She gave me a platform. She gave me the chance to not just change my own life, but to change others' lives too. And now, when I walk into restaurants, I make eye contact with every server. I learn their names. I ask about their lives, because I remember what invisible feels like, and I refuse to make anyone else feel that way. Last week, one of our scholarship recipients graduated with honors. She's the first person in her family to finish college. At the ceremony, she thanked me in her speech, but she got it wrong. Sophia Martinez saved my life, she said. No, Eleanor Castellano refused to let me stay invisible, and that refusal created ripples that are still spreading, still changing lives, still proving that being seen, really, truly seen, is sometimes all it takes to change everything. So to everyone listening who feels invisible right now, who's working 3 jobs and wondering if anyone notices, who's fighting and struggling and barely surviving, I see you. Your story matters. Your struggle matters. You matter. Don't let the world tell you to stay invisible. Be yourself, even for one moment. You never know who's watching, who's paying attention, or what that moment might become. Thank you for listening to my story. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more real stories about real transformation. Stay invisible, my boss whispered, but I didn't, and that made all the difference.